Photography is culture, both humanistic and technical. Usually technique is perceived as a limitation to your imagination, while in reality is the tool to free your imagination. We will now enter the darkroom, where I will show you a practical method to choose exposure and contrast starting from the test strip. The choice of exposure and contrast is generally done quite superficially, while it is one of the most important moments that you have in the darkroom. Enlargers are different, they look different, they have different shapes, but they are all the same. Any enlargers has a mechanism to make bigger or smaller print by raising or lowering the head. Then has a negative carrier, somewhere where you put the negative you're gonna print, and a focusing device. It's usually a bellow, of which you can vary the extension. When you print, you're going to select exposure time by changing the time and the aperture, and it's a good advice to look for an exposure time that is between 20 and 30 seconds, so you will have time enough to do manipulation and the time is long enough to be precise. The most important thing in black and white printing is the regulation of contrast. You can have a contrast too high or too low, and you have tools to adjust the contrast. In a color head like this one, we adjust the contrast by changing the color of the light. When we increase the magenta value, we raise the contrast. Decreasing the magenta value lowers the contrast. When there is no filters, or all the filters set at the same level, the contrast is medium. When we need a lower contrast, we use yellow filter. The more yellow, the lower the contrast. It's not important which value you use, it's important the contrast you have on the print. So you can use any number that provides you the correct contrast on the print. There are other kinds of enlargers, like the normal condenser head enlarger, in which you adjust the contrast by changing colored filter inside the head. The lower is the number of the filter, the lower is the contrast. Remember, filter 00 or 0 are the lowest in contrast, and they are kind of yellowish. By increasing the contrast, you have more intense magenta colored filters. So it's exactly the same as it is in the color head. The only thing that you have you can change the contrast only in half grade steps, while on the color head the contrast regulation is continuous. When we put the negative in the negative carrier, we give a clean for the glass carrier below, another one inside, and then we clean the negative. It's important to clean the negative gently and to remember that the first wipe cleans it, the second brings the dirt back, so do not over clean. Then we insert the negative in the carrier with the emulsion facing down. The emulsion is usually opaque, while the back of the film is usually glossy. So when the negative is inserted in the carrier, we put it in the enlarger. Switch on the light, the print is covered. Take away my sheet. and give the minimum amount of exposure I think is necessary. Then after that I cover the image at regular time intervals. When the image is covered, I switch off the light. I can now develop the print. I check the time when I put the sheet into the developer. Enter from one side in order to have it wet the quickest possible. And I check the time the image appears. After 15 seconds the image starts to appear, and that's my reference time. This paper develops an average development for this paper is about 10 times the time it takes to appear. So 150 seconds, 2 minutes and a half. Regular agitation is important. So we keep tilting the tray all the time, and once every 30 seconds we flip the print twice. The print shall always be face up, because otherwise you can get some scratches from the bottom of the tray. A little before the end of the developing time, take out the print from the developer, let the developer go, and when the time ends, I put the print in the stop button. The stop button is essential, it cannot be skipped anyway. Skipping the stop button will make stains on the print and poorly fixed images. The stop button is enough, about 30 seconds is usually enough. After the stop button, we fix the print, always with regular agitation. The best fixer is the rapid fixer used concentrated, in order to keep fixing time low. A rapid fixer at a high concentration has a fixing time of between 1 minute and 1 minute and a half, and it is good practice not to exceed the maximum fixing time. When the fixing time is terminated, we take out the print and bring it to the observation board. Et voila! Here we have our first test strip. To evaluate the test strip, we only look at the extremes of the tonal range. So either highlights and shadows. The highlights we like, the shadows we like. It is a very common mistake to look at midtones. And it is a mistake because midtones don't give you any information about the contrast. Because whatever is the contrast you set, you can always obtain that exact midtone just by changing the exposure. So since we're looking for information about the contrast, we don't look at midtones, but we look at the extremes of the tonal range, so highlights and shadows. To evaluate the test strip, we always start from the brightest part of the test strip. So we start exploring the image until we found the first correct tone. In this case, I found the highlights on the second strip, while I found the shadows on the 7th or the 6th strip. so with more time. This means that the contrast is too low because there is less time for the highlights and more time for the shadows. So if I make a print with this time that gives correct shadows, the highlights will be too dark. While if I make this print, I have correct highlights but no shadows at all. There is no black, no dark gray, it's too pale. So the only solution is to run another test strip changing the contrast. The first test strip showed too little contrast, so now I run another test strip with a higher contrast. Whenever I change contrast, I have to run another test strip, since exposure changes when you change contrast. I do the same thing as before, give the little amount of exposure, I think it's enough, and then make other strips at regular intervals. And now I can develop this one. This second test strip is developed. The time it takes to appear was the same, so I developed for the same amount of time, 2 minutes and a half. And now I do the stop bar and fixing just as before. And now we go to see what the second test strip looks like. Here we have our second test strip. I used a higher contrast than before, and but I use the same method to evaluate the test strip. So I start from the brightest part till I found the first tone that looks right to me. And here I found the shadows, the darkest part, that are already suitable on the second or the third strip, while I see a good highlight with a longer exposure time. So this means that I used contrast that's too high. In fact, if I print for the highlights using this exposure time, the darkest part will be too dark, while if I print on this side to have the correct dark tones, the highlights will be too bright. So again, the solution is to run another test strip, this time using a lower contrast. So even the second test strip wasn't correct, it showed a contrast that was too high, so now we run another test strip with a lower contrast, something in between. Again, it is very important that every time that you change contrast, you run another test strip, because exposure changes with contrast. So again, same as before. And now we can develop this third test strip. After the third attempt, this should be the right contrast, and so now I develop the whole sheet with one single exposure, no more test strip, and let's see what it looks like. Developing is as before, exactly as before. Fixing time is complete. This shall be our print. And now we go to see what it looks like in the proper light. Here we have all the prints we made. We started with the low contrast, and it was too low for the image. In fact, the highlights come with a shorter time than the shadows. Then I raise the contrast and obtain this, where the contrast is too high because we need less time to make the shadows and more to make the highlights. Then I run another test strip, and finally both shadows and highlights came with the same exposure time. And with that exposure time, I made the print. I developed the method I showed you in this video to help my student, and I hope it will help you as well.